Norman, thank you so much for doing this meeting. Okay.
In 94 years, that could be the loveliest compliment I've ever received from Ben Bradlee, that he looked forward to a phone call from me and would talk to me longer than he might talk to those glorious men who were his close friends. All gone. We could have started with how's Quinn, how's Ben, Ben, my son, and how's Sally, how's Lynn. I don't know. I don't remember having another male friend I thought more of as a buddy. I don't even know what buddy means, but I know what it feels like. To start with, everybody talked about that. You know, it wasn't, it was perfectly okay to talk, for the women to talk about Ben that way, for couples to talk about him that way, for anyone to talk to Sally about Ben that way. I mean, this voice and that bearing and who he was as a man and as a citizen and a celebrity, and all of those things were male as could be. And that and a certain kind of charm, I think, made him as attractive a male to a woman. Well, I can't remember his full name because it was about a half a block long. Benjamin Crowenshield, something or other, Bradlee. I mean, it was a very long name, and it was a very Back Bay Brahmin, Boston Brahmin name. It was easily the classiest name, and he came from the classiest neighborhood and family I ever knew. I don't think he was aware in that sense, and that, I think, had a great deal to do with his charm. I mean, he was a good friend of JFK's, and you would never know it unless you happened to be talking about that. And he mentioned that he was, sitting over a drink when they said this, that, or the other thing. Everybody was his pal, his buddy, or someone he didn't know. There was no rank. Well, I think he was born with a great bullshit meter, and he knew it when it was there or around, and he sought the opposite constantly. And as an editor, he invited me twice to, I can't remember what they were called, but the mornings they sat around and talked about what, or was it the late afternoons? I don't recall, when they talked about what the front page would be, a front page meeting. And I don't know, it was a kind of miracle time for me because he didn't, if somebody walked in and didn't know anybody, they might not know who was running the meeting. And yet his firm hand and opinion and so forth was all over it. But that's the way he was able to do it. He was sitting with 20-some people, and he was one-on-one with each of them as though they were alone. I met Ben because I met Sally. I met Sally first, and she told me, "Oh, you're going to love my husband." And then I learned later that she had told Ben on the phone. I met her in Los Angeles, actually in my home. So I can't remember who brought her there with some event. And she told me I would love her guy. And then I learned later she told him the same. And she was a prophet. We hit it off immediately. It was a couple of years before Quinn. And by the way, he had Quinn. I met my wife, Lynn, not my wife at the time, told him we were getting married. So it was in, I mean, we lived through all of that together, but what I wanted to get to was a special walk on the beach in East Hampton. And my bride, 25 years younger than I, wished a child. I, at the time, had 3 children. And I asked him as we were walking the beach. He was a father for about 3-4 months. Quinn was a baby. And what do you think, Ben? And he put his arm on my shoulder and said, Norman, the best, the best, the best. And that encouraged me a great deal. It might have been the reason. But I agreed to become a father again, and did that now, once and then twice with twins. And we traveled together. As a result of all of that, there were 3 kids with the 4 of us. 4 kids with the 4 of us on a they didn't call it a boat or raft down a river in France. That's another thing about him. He was always the same. I don't remember him in a mood. I mean, he could be a little angry about something in the headline or have a strong opinion. But to the extent that I knew him, he was not a moody man. He was always in a good mood. The polio never stopped Ben for a second. It was, in his life as I saw him live it, it was a 5-minute conversation every 4 years. He told somebody every several years that he had had polio. Well, I think feeling lucky to be at the right place at the right time was very much a part of his character. But that would be true of anything that happened to him any day. Well, for me, I'm sure for him too, it was clearly we were the good guys. We didn't know that there would be civil wars where whether we were the good guys was very much in doubt. But it was, it was very clear we were the good guys. In addition to that, I had the question of being Jewish. And when I was 9 years old, my dad went to prison for 3 years. And it was then that I learned that there was a Father Coughlin who hated me and wished other people to dislike, if not hate me, because I was born to Jewish parents. So I started to say I was a scared kid, and then I came off that mentally when, because we had in school in those years civics classes. We don't have them anymore, unfortunately. And I learned that I had a Constitution, a Bill of Rights, etc., a declaration that protected me from all of that. Very sustaining in my life. But all of those things played a big role in my immediate desire to enlist. I didn't do it immediately because my mother begged me not to. But she said she would die, and I guess I thought, if you have to die, you have to die. 8 months later, or whenever it was that I enlisted. I'm talking about it more now because I've been doing interviews related to my film and book and all that stuff, and a couple of interviews about friends who passed, and especially this friend who also served. But it's as much as I've ever talked about it. You wouldn't wish me to remember the details, but but I do remember with Art Buchwald, and there are a couple of other names I recognize too. But Art I knew very well. Art and Ben and I spent a good deal of time together. But there were a couple of other names I know well and can't recall who were in Paris at that time. Yeah, and that was a good time for Ben. I remember it just as a period in his life when all of that was going on. No, actually, I don't know if he had a friend with whom he discussed the fun and intimacy, but he did not with me. It, just to understand what the period was like, but no details. I wish to talk about that more than he did. He backed away from. Now, maybe there were intimacies between those friends that he didn't wish to report, and I mean political intimacies. I don't mean, and and maybe he felt he that it was John Kennedy's story to tell, but I do recall wishing to know more and not getting it. But my memory is he didn't remember that in intimate conversations with me in a way that allowed me to understand it took place. But no, he wouldn't talk about it. That expression, the loss of innocence, uh, has come up so many times, and I'm not so sure I understand that there was a time just before, like hours before, we were a much more innocent society. Then this happened, and we became far less innocent. Uh, this was the first assassination. No, it wasn't the first. It was the first in our lifetimes. Uh, Innocence is a big word to cast on an entire culture, and I've never been certain we were innocent, and suddenly this happened, and we weren't. We have a long way to grow up, even at this moment, but a long way. We became aware reasonably early on that something was wrong. We were not, I talked about good guys in World War II. We were clearly not the good guys here. Even those who believed in the war or believed that America can't be wrong probably believed that more than they believed in the war itself. Wait a minute, we're America. We can't be wrong. If feeling that is a loss of innocence, I'm learning something myself this minute. I think part of what made Ben Ben was that uh, he could be objective about it, and he was above it in the sense that he could see the whole picture, 360 degrees. So you have to be sufficiently above or to the side, or and at the same time, this was a man of great feeling. That was the interesting thing about Ben too, is he didn't uh, seek to share those feelings, but they existed, and I think that he could be subjective. 360 degrees is what made him the editor and observer that he was. It was important to me because that's what was going on. We were we were delivering a family that was living a life in this moment, and I'm doing a show now. Unlike that show then, we dropped a new one every week, and since we were only a few weeks ahead, we were pretty current. Today you do 13 shows and they're all on, and it's very hard to stay and be current because people binge. We didn't know the word then. It wasn't pushing the envelope as I saw it and as I think about it now. It was reporting. Everybody that worked on these shows read 2 or 3 newspapers a day because that's what we all talked about. Got their ideas for the shows from what was happening in the world around them. They were paying close attention to their kids and their mates, and they came in with stories that were taking place and problems their kids and wives or mates were having. And those were the things we talked about. Somebody comes in one day and says, hey, you know, there's increased hypertension in black males. And this was a specific thing that happened. And, well, we're doing good times, so let's try this, work out a story. We worked out a story. When the show went on the air in, let's say, October, nobody, the audience, didn't know what was coming. And when the show ended, there were, I don't know, thousands of phone calls to the network from black families seeking more information on hypertension in black males. Now the network knew for the first time, we knew for the first time, or perhaps the first time, that this could happen. So when we were working on something that felt like it, you know, we paid more attention to it, told the network up ahead, and sometimes they would put an advisory on to help people in advance. It was what was happening up the street, down the street, and across the street from all of us, if not in our own homes. Didn't that end up with Archie brushing him away and saying, stand up for the kind of land that I love, stand beside her and guide her, and then he goes fully into the song? That came up in rehearsal. It wasn't in the script. His singing that song, full out, so he winds up through the land from above. And he winds up, God bless America, land that I love, finishes the song. And it was hilarious because the others were fighting, trying to get his ear out. He just bellowed the song. And when we did it in a dress rehearsal, the network said, can't do it. We didn't have the right to do it. We didn't have the license to do it. And it was so great. Carol O'Connor was so great. I wound up saying, if there's any problem with this, because we didn't, if we sought a license to do it, we would make the call and be refused because Irving Berlin didn't allow that. And somebody would refuse it miles or blocks or many stories below Mr. Berlin, and he wouldn't even know about it. I said, I'll take the brunt of any problem if it, and sign some paper or whatever. And the show went on the air, and it was great. And maybe 6 weeks later, there was a phone call. Irving Berlin wanted to talk to me. A day and a half later, after I recovered, no, I took the call, and he wanted to thank me because he had just seen it and loved it. And that's my God Bless America story. No, I didn't know about that until, I don't know, 20 years ago. Many years after the fact. I didn't know. Nobody learned about it until the White House tapes came out. By then I knew I was on Nixon's enemies list, and I was proud of my company, the company I was in. He resigns every 4 weeks for me because I constantly am seeing the footage. Somebody's running it someplace. So he just resigned day before yesterday again. I remember it as I've seen it portrayed to me constantly. I remember that very well. Alan Pakula directed it, and I loved Jason Robards. I had worked with him on Divorce American Style, and now I'm not remembering as I repeat it which came first, All the President's Men or Divorce American Style. But I think the Robards character came as close as anybody was going to get it on film. I remember thinking about it too. I never thought of another actor that, if they had used so and so. Jason was as good as it could get. Attacks on freedom of the press, wherever they've taken place, have great similarities. People are in charge who don't want to be pestered by having the citizenry, the people who know them best. They don't want them to know a lot of what they're doing. And so the press is pesky for them. The more they have a problem, the more they want to control, the less they want everybody to know that's what's happening. And so the problem grows deeper and thicker between the office holder and the reporter. What's going on today? And as I sit here, it's only 10, 12, 14 days, whatever it is, into this administration. And I'm not sure we know how or understand how serious all of it is yet. But I'm thinking this is a man who has to have his way. But I get stuck on the word man. Not because I think he's not a man, but because I think he could be a boy. And this is a child running the nation. I don't see any I see similarities in a general way in history, which would include Nixon, but this individual is totally unique in my 94-year experience. I think Ben would be deeply concerned, and licking his chops would express how he felt, as I felt, as we all felt at the beginning. Because there was a time we were all kind of amazed and wondering and even, it could be said, enjoying, because we didn't accept the threat that it could happen, or we hadn't accepted at that point. But I don't think he'd be salivating now. I think he'd be deep into wishing the public. I think if Ben were here, there'd be a much bigger fuss about the president's taxes. Yeah, and the president has somehow accepted that. They're not continuing to fight. Oh, I love that we're going to conclude with this. Yes, yes. And it's because it happens to be the way I feel too. There are two little words in the English language we don't pay enough attention to. We accept their worth, their importance. Over and next. Something's over, it's over. We're on to next. And if there was a hammock in the middle of over and next, that's the best way to express living in the moment. And Ben lived in the moment. I mean, look at it. It took me 94 years, some months, some weeks, some days, to get to this moment where I'm looking at that little red dot in the mirror. I'm seeing the guy's script, can't see his face, he's looking at it. Took all that time to get here. And it took every split second of his life to hear me say this. And everybody who is listening, wherever they see this today and in the future, it will have taken every split second of your lives, all of you, to join me in love of Ben Bradlee. Strong, male, gentle, giant, sweet, good with 7 O's, and great. People live their lives not wanting to hear the truth much of the time, and not knowing it, not understanding that they don't want to be dealt the truth much of the time. And Ben was after the truth, which, if Ben were here today, and the Washington Post, which I consider in Remnick's terms dangerous at this moment, would be far more dangerous.